Macon, Georgia. I'm an attorney in Macon, Georgia, and I came out of a nonprofit where we focus on heirs property and estate planning. And when I decided to go into private practice, I said, I'm going to do estate planning and I'll do a little consulting on heirs property. But I quickly learned that my plan was not the way it was going to be, because very, very quickly I learned that heirs property was what was heavy on people's minds. And so, of course, I still do a lot of estate planning, but the heirs property part is what has completely taken over. And it's the reason being is because heirs property is such a prevalent issue, and it's something that we don't really talk a whole lot about. It's something that a lot of people they don't really pay attention to it until it becomes a problem. And so, especially in the farming community with our farmers, where land and property is essential to their livelihood and their well-being, it's very, very important that we talk about how it can impact their farming and their ability to earn their livelihood. And so we're going to talk about promoting peace of mind by addressing heirs property. I will say personally, I think that it was when a few months ago, I actually heard a presentation by Tara, and I think Tara said that she did, correct me if I'm wrong, that you were familiar with some research, or you participated in some research where heirs property and succession planning were highlighted as some of the top stressors for farmers.
I don't think that
I can't remember who presented that, but it was something that was discussed in a group that I was in. I know that Tara was part of that group, and I can't remember if it was research that she presented or if it was someone else. But I was really surprised to learn that myself. But let me just check. Are y'all able to hear me okay?
You're coming through great, and your slides look fantastic.
Okay, good. Okay. So, all right. So what we're going to do is talk about what is heirs property. We'll focus a little on this because it's just very important to know what heirs property is. And the way I like to define it is property that's passed down from one generation to the next in a way that more and more members of the same family are owning the same piece of property. So you can have a house, you can have a 300-acre farm. It could be a little bitty post stamp size lot. Anything can become heirs property if a living person once owned it and they passed away, and then their heirs ended up owning that property. And so what you have is, a very simple situation here. We have the original owner of the property had 3 children. 2 of the children passed away, and so then their property has gone to their heirs, and it just continues to grow as time goes on. And it's important to note that heirs property can be created without a will. So if someone, let's say this original owner died and they did not have a will, that property will automatically go to their heirs, which often would be children and or a spouse. At least it depends. It could be, depending on where you are in the country, it could also include parents. And it could get really kind of complex depending on where you are. But just as time goes on, more and more members of the same family own the property. And if you work with farmers, and you may have seen this before, where daddy was a farmer, and then daddy taught his kids how to farm, and they farmed, and they just grew up on the farm, they worked the farm, and then as time went on, they just picked up where daddy left off, and then it just keeps going. But sometimes it's the case where there's no legal transfer of the ownership from one generation to the next. And so we end up with this heirs property. And the number of people who own the property grows exponentially over time, to where you could have a situation like this, which I will say is still very simple, because you have one original owner who died and they had 3 children. And now those 3 children, they've passed on, and interest in their property has gone to spouses, grandchildren, and it continues to go to great grandchildren. And you even have some situations where people outside the family could inherit an interest in the property, because you have to remember that who ends up owning part of the property is determined by the heirs of each individual person who inherits an interest in the property, and then passes away. So you can have an example like I've highlighted here, where a child passes away and they don't have they don't have a spouse, they don't have children. So then it ends up that their parent who's not related to the family could end up inheriting a part of the family property. And this just gets more complicated. So like I said, this is a simple situation because we started out with 3 children. How many farming families do you know have 3 children? Historically, farm families have often had, large families. These are some of the largest families you see. So I think back to my parents. My mom has 8 brothers and sisters, and my dad has 10 brothers and sisters. Imagine, and it did happen with my father, where he and his 10 brothers and sisters inherited their mom's little bitty house in the country. So just imagine how this can be. They did something to clean it up. It was in Louisiana. Their laws are different. So I don't know what they did, but that could just imagine after my dad's generation is gone, how many people would end up owning that little house if they don't do something about that heirs property. And so some of the challenges that heirs property presents, these are very, very significant challenges when you think about our farmers. You don't have clear and marketable title. So you own something that you can't sell, that you can't transfer without having to jump through a lot of hoops. You've inherited this property that you now own with other relatives, and all of you have equal rights to use the property the way that you want. And it's not like I own 10%, so I can use 10%. You have 10%, but you can use the whole property. Now, if your use of the property encroaches upon somebody else's use of the property, like if you own a 10% interest and you lease out the whole property, and then you take all the money that you owe your co-tenants, your co-owners, but there's nothing stopping you from being able to lease the whole property and get all the money yourself. You just, legally you will owe everyone else. But just look at this in a farming context. A lot of farmers, they might either farm land that they own, or some people might even lease land to other folks. So you might be leasing a farm, or you might even be farming the land. Like, let's say that a person has inherited an interest in a farm. They don't own the whole thing, they just own a percentage, but the way they see it, this is my farm. And so they farm the whole property. They could be liable to their co-owners for rent because they've used the whole property for their own benefit. And so the other family members, they were not able to use the property in that way. So technically that farmer owes their co-tenants. In reality, it doesn't always end up where they have to pay them back, but that liability is still there. So you have that issue. You have the issue where co-owners can sell their part of the property to someone in the family, someone outside the family. And then that puts the ownership of the property at risk, because that outside person now has a right to have their financial interest in the property realized by forcing a sale, or to even have their ownership of the property realized by forcing a division of the property. And then some actions would require the agreement of all of the co-owners: selling the property, harvesting timber, borrowing money against the property. And it's more challenging to access USDA programs. Just imagine you're a farmer and you own heirs property, but you can't get access to the same grants and loans and other programs that a farmer who does not own heirs property has. I mean, does not own heirs property, the access that they have to those programs. So it makes you less competitive as a farmer when you are farming heirs property. And another issue is that your property can become subject to the debts of co-owners. So, you own this property jointly with your family. Everything seems to be moving smoothly until someone who co-owns this property with you owes the wrong person money, and that person wants to get paid back. They can force a foreclosure of the property and have the money distributed to the heirs, but that land is gone because there's been a forced sale. And another thing is that the financial responsibilities often will fall on one or a few owners. So Again, things like paying the taxes, the property taxes, paying for insurance, paying if somebody, I had a client where someone, the septic tank got messed up. And this property is owned by a lot of people, but there was one person who took the responsibility for getting that septic tank fixed. So these are the kinds of things that people who own heirs property face. And thinking about it from a farmer perspective, it's hard enough to farm. It's hard enough to make food come out of the ground. And if you have to juggle these things as well, it's just adding to the stress and the mental challenges that farmers are facing. So I think I've sufficiently highlighted the problems and challenges that farmers face, and I'm gonna go very briefly into some solutions that I like to present to people when we're dealing with heirs property. And I will say, I think that this is probably, I probably won't be able to go too in depth just with the time, but we'll definitely talk more about it at the upcoming webinar if you wanted to come for that. So going into some solutions, I like to put resolving heirs property in 4 phases. The first phase is you have to clear the title up. A lot of times with heirs property, you have this land, and when you go to the deed records, the land records for sorry, I stopped speaking too quickly. When you go to the deed records in the county where that land is located, the owner of the property listed may be deceased. So you look through and you look for a deed, the most recent deed to the property, and you see the name of a person who's no longer living. So you know that there are some other people who have inherited an interest in this land, but you don't know who those people are. And so clearing the title is the process of identifying all of those other owners and finding a way to get some sense of who actually owns the property, how much of an interest they own, identifying the owners, identifying how much they own. And then once you have that cleaned up and you know, okay, these are the exact owners of this property, then you want to try to consolidate the title. You want to get it out of the names of so many people and put it into the names of a smaller number of people. And it could be that it's one family member, 2 or 3 family members, or it could even be something like an LLC or a trust, which would be a way of owning the property corporately. After that, you want to convert the property to some profitable use. You want to make sure that you can cover the expenses for the property, because that's going to increase the likelihood that you'll keep it functioning and keep it thriving. And finally, you want to make sure you have a succession plan in place. You want to create a succession plan to prevent heirs property from coming up in the future. So these are the things that I recommend to people. Of course, there's a lot of different strategies that I would recommend to accomplish these goals, but this is generally the process that I guide my clients through so that we can get some sense of their heirs property and help them to move forward with more clarity and more structure concerning their property. So I think that's it for me right now. Love to answer questions if I have time.
Yeah. I was sitting here thinking, Veronica, since we've been talking to you quite a bit and really concentrating on getting farmers to talk about heirs property, it has been bringing these stories to the front of my mind about when families have not spoken about this beforehand, just the heartbreak that it ends up causing some of these families because they're disagreeing on what should happen or who gets what, all because they were afraid to have the conversation while their parent was alive. So I feel like now I just really want to start pushing, like, everybody I know, like, do this ahead of time. Don't be afraid to have that conversation, because it's going to save you so much chaos and frustration on the other side. And I think a lot of us farmers don't think about it now because we're just so busy farming, but it's something that really needs to bring, to the forefront for everyone.
I agree.
Yeah. I don't see any messages in the chat, but if you guys have a question, just go ahead and unmute and ask Veronica as you please.
Or if they come up with a question, we can field those too at the end.
Yeah.
Harry, so. Yeah. So if something comes up later, pop it in the chat and we'll have a little time, hopefully at the end, to answer some questions as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll hang around.
Okay, yeah, if you can hang around, Veronica, because sometimes letting them process, you come up with something later. And then actually, Veronica, if you will go ahead and put your contact information in the chat, because if something comes up later and somebody has a legal question, you would be the perfect person to contact.
Will do. I'll work on that. And I would love to hear from folks in the chat if they wanted to share just anything, because this is a learning process for me as well. So any thoughts or ideas or concerns, I love to see those and see how I can help address them in the work that I do.
And if you don't want to post publicly, just go ahead and chat directly with Veronica. All right, so Veronica, we'll let you stop sharing and we'll go ahead and transfer over to Shelbie. Shelbie is a part of the SWAG Center in Texas and is really helping us get our helpline out there, the AgriStress helpline. She's been an integral part in helping to market that. But the SWAG Center has a social media toolkit that we would love for everybody to know about. So we'll let her go ahead and start with her presentation.
I was muted. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it looks great.
Perfect. So for this presentation, I wasn't sure if everyone was from Texas. I figured they weren't. So this isn't specifically promoting the AgriStress helpline that we're involved with, but really just the Seasons Change You Remain campaign that we began first in, I would say, October of 2019. It began out of a mental health campaign, a project that we were working on, and this was compiled, and we realized there was a need for promoting this kind of messaging towards agricultural populations. And it's really developed over time, over the last couple of years. And so we'll dive into what it looks like and how you could access it if you'd like to use it for your organization, and how it can benefit you and the producers. So with this campaign, again, it's targeted messaging that resonates with agricultural populations. We were able to put this messaging together, again, over the last few years. But with this year, it was different. We were able to take this messaging to a few meetings with producers and have, focus groups, so to speak, where we talked about the messaging, had them review it. They had a little rating system. And so they went through and rated the images and the text and the captions, and really gave us their feedback on what they thought about the messaging, because at the end of the day, they're the ones receiving it. And so it may have sounded good to us, but we wanted to make sure that they felt like they could resonate with what they saw if it were to pop up on their phone or their computer. And of course, this has some mental health language and stress language in there. So some of it has been vetted by mental health professionals to make sure that the language was appropriate. And then we shared this across multiple platforms, including our social media, of course, our website, and it's even been translated into Spanish thanks to the help of AgriSafe. They made that possible. So we will be adding that to our website if anyone would like to access that. The great thing about the Spanish translation is it can be available to migrant workers within the Southwest that we serve. And so they can actually have this messaging, and it can be shared on different platforms. So I know it's kind of small, but this is one of the messaging, the images we used, and this partnership with the Texas Department of Agriculture, which we're working with right now. So it's got their logo on there, but it says being tough sometimes means asking for help. And this was, again, some of the messaging that was reviewed by producers in Texas. We got after talking with them, we came to the conclusion, it's clear that those in agriculture are very independent, very strong, and sometimes stubborn. And again, the idea of being tough is a positive trait for them, and you can get through anything, because if you know anything about agriculture, it's very, there's a lot of uncontrollable circumstances, whether it's the weather, finances, the market, now things that are happening across the globe are affecting agriculture. So there's always something that's changing and taking place that is increasing the stress of this population. And so our messaging was, it's a, one thing, it's okay to ask for help, but this one said being tough sometimes means asking for help. So being tough doesn't always mean you do it on your own. It means you rely on the community around you, the resources that are made available, and even seeking help from friends, family, and potentially a mental health professional. This one says you are worth more here. One conversation we had with producers was that, unfortunately, when someone gets to the point where they're just so overwhelmed by the stress that's taking place in their life, whether it's just complete devastation to their farm, increased debt that they feel like they can never get out of, something traumatic has taken place. Unfortunately, thoughts run through their mind and they think, well, my insurance policy is going to be worth a lot more than my life. And sadly, that's a thought for some of these producers. And so we wanted to put messaging out there to reinforce the idea that you are worth more than that insurance policy. Your family needs you, your community needs you. You're worth more here than not here. And so that was one of the messaging that we used. Producers really liked that. They really resonated with it, and they felt very encouraged by words like this. And I think that's all that I have here. So we have a lot more messaging. That's just a couple examples of what we've used. Of course, that was the Instagram view of it. But we have a PDF document, all the images and captions that can be used. And then we have some suggestions for scheduling those for seasonal themes. That's where it was created, was to align this messaging with the different seasonal stresses that occur in agriculture. And so this toolkit will lay it all out for you. It includes hashtags to use, maybe potential organizations that you'd like to tag, as well as how to post, what format, the captions, etc. So one thing I want to reinforce is, again, planning these posts for seasonal stress. We do have some suggested timelines for when to post these messaging, but it might be different in your state or area. For Texas, it's, if it actually snows at all, it could be more in the spring months. For other states, it could be in the November, December months. And so plan accordingly for your area, and make sure that you understand that the types of seasonal stress might be different for different areas. Again, know your audience. Again, producers look different in different areas. They look different in Texas than they would, Missouri or Louisiana. We have more forestry and, of course, commercial fishing in our area. So we've incorporated messaging to target those producers as well. For you, there might be more dairy workers. So you can kind of tailor this messaging. And if you'd like to maybe create your own, you could pull in some images that you've used for projects and overlay this captioning that we've created already. Use hashtags and make sure to tag others. So this is a big one. If you're using relevant hashtags, again, we've have some suggested in the toolkit, but if there's ones that that are used commonly among your organizations or the industries, definitely use those. Tag people that you feel that would be that could benefit from this post or content, and then they would be made aware and can share this on their platform as well. And it really just spreads the word and gets this information out there more broadly. Lastly, consider boosting your post. For us, we actually had to start our whole Facebook page last year. And so if you have a really big following, then you may not need to do this, but I would consider it. You can put very little money towards it and make sure that your ads are very targeted and focused on the group that you want to promote these images to. So we selected, what their interests were. You can select gender, you can select age, location that you want to target. And so you can really focus in on certain areas and make sure that you're spending your money wisely. When it comes to analytics for this campaign, I highly suggest that you use a shortened URL that you can track how many clicks go to this post. And so if you add a website link to either our resources or your own, make sure that you can track how many clicks go to that, because Facebook does an okay job with this, but if you can track it on your own, that'll be great for reporting later and just for your own knowledge to know how many people actually went to that website. And then from there, depending on the advanced options that shortened URL has, you might be able to see where the clicks come from and who accessed that. So we use Bitly, the free version, and it gives us how many clicks on what days. And of course, Facebook and Instagram offer some insights on who's engaging with your post and that content. You can use that for reporting as well. So if you would like to use this campaign for your own, we would be happy to give you that document. It's on our website now. You can insert your own resources. If you'd like to add your own logo, we can share the images without any logos on them, and your organization information in the caption. We suggest creating a press release and sharing this with colleagues. One thing we did was, again, writing up a press release and sharing it with our public affairs here at our university, local news stations, just talking about the effort around promoting mental health for the ag communities and how important it is. And then again, posting on social media platforms and making sure you're tagging other people. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. I forgot to put my email here, but I can put in the chat for you if you need to contact us. This QR code actually goes to our webpage. It has all of our resources on it, as well as media kit information and things like that. So it was a pleasure talking with you all and getting to share our campaign. And we created it in hopes to spread it around. So if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive that to put your own information on it, let us know. We'd be happy to.
Yeah. Thank you, Shelbie. I had a couple thoughts come to mind, and the one was, first off, being an organization that actually took into account that you're going to send your marketing materials and put them in front of producers to make sure that you get the atmosphere right, I think is essential, because farmers are very prideful about their industry. And if you get it wrong, they're not, just immediately, just on that one marketing piece, they're not going to take it seriously. But I was thinking, like all of us on here basically market on social media now. So that toolkit, if you guys want to scan the QR code, or if you have the link handy, you can put it in the chat along with your contact information. That would honestly take a lot of the work out of some posts for the rest of us, because you're always looking for new creative ways. And man, you've got the hashtags there, you've got everything that can just make life a little bit easier for us. So there's no questions in the chat. Nicole loves the media toolkit. If anybody wants to ask Shelbie some questions, feel free to go ahead and unmute at this time, or you can send a private chat to her.
I wanted to ask a quick question, just with sharing this, and I might have missed it. Is this something that y'all have like ongoing fresh posts, or is it like a year's worth of content that you prepared and we can just use that over the course of a year?
Yeah, for us right now, we're sharing it really in conjunction with the Texas Department of Agriculture because of a grant that we've received. And that's going on until September 1. But this is the kind of messaging that you can share anytime. We've shared it before we received the grant funds. And it's just a great, I think, set of messaging that can be shared at all times because it's relevant to seasonal stress. So you could use it at any time. It's especially, I think, great when it's important to follow, I think, ag news and understanding what's going on in their community, because you might think it's a slow time, but they might be experiencing some kind of economic impact or market changes. And so that would be a great time to push this messaging out.
Yeah, I've seen the toolkit, Veronica, and it's like you have a whole menu of things that you can pick and choose. So it's all there ready to go.
Looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Shelbie will go ahead and put that all in the chat for you guys to look at. And we will move to our last speaker, Mr. Dale Dobson, and he's going to give us kind of our inspirational story of the day. So we'll let him go ahead and take the floor.
All right. Appreciate being here. Hope everybody can see and hear okay. I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about the value of a handshake. We talking about, some of y'all talked about stress and talked about trying to inherit the farm and the stress that involves with that and farming and operating and stuff. On a day-to-day basis, we deal with a lot of stress out here in agriculture. Some of the biggest stress issues I deal with, and a lot of farmers here in Kentucky deal with, is just sharing the road, moving equipment from one farm to the next on that part there. That's a big stress. So anyhow, a couple of years ago, we come up with some idea. I worked with some young people called Dixie Ag Safety Team. And I always did put value in a handshake, and a real handshake. And never would have thought I'd be teaching young people how to shake hands. But shaking hands is almost a lost art for all of us, okay? And there's value in it. You visit somebody that's having a bad day or just everything going wrong. You walk up and talk to them, spend some time with them, share with them, listen to them. And a handshake and a hug goes a long ways on that part there. COVID's made it hard on that world right there. People being scared to touch, but there's a lot of us not. And handshake, and I put a token to it. A few years ago, I was in Lexington. Does anybody here, y'all understand what a challenge coin is? Here's one right here. It's a challenge coin, okay? Challenge coin. Firefighters pass them out, police, military, governors, presidents have them on that part, and they pass them out. And if you're in a bar and you ain't got yours, you're supposed to buy drinks. That's their challenge. But I have put a real challenge to my coin. I have put a challenge to my coin about life and death and good days and bad days. And I come up with this. I was teaching a big farm rescue class up here in Lexington a few years ago. And a battalion chief by the name of Greg Bear come in and stopped my class that day and pulled me and another instructor out and brought us up to the front of the class. And he gave us his battalion chief coin, shook our hand, patted us on the back, and he told us he appreciated us for always coming and doing the classes, just basically just coming doing our job. He told us he appreciated us. Well, that stuck in my mind. I probably have had 100 challenge coins give to me over my career, but that one coin stuck out. That one day stuck out because he made me feel so special when he stopped class and gave me his battalion chief coin and talked about what we do in saving lives. So with that being said, here's where we're at today. We've come up with the idea, and I've had some help with some of this. I see Dr. Joan Mazur sitting there. You know, she's behind me on all this. She's been some help there with me on this. And we come up with the idea that we want to put value in the handshake. You know, we know there's value there, and we know it can make you feel good, okay? Well, our value in our handshake is we come up with this little token, the challenge coin. Y'all see the front. I'm trying to make sure you can see it says Dixie Ag Safety Team, Kentucky. And we got some Dixie firefighters that made some, and we passed them. And then we've made some that says Dixie Ag Safety Team. In the past 18 months, I have shaken over 330 hands with this coin in my handshake, okay? This is my icebreaker. I can visit a farm, and sometimes asking that question, sometimes opening that door is a challenge. How do you start talking about a subject, stress? How do you start talking about a subject of suicide? How do you open the door and get somebody to talk to you without telling you to leave on that part? How do you open the door? And this is my door opener. I pull out my challenge coin. I got it in my hand. I'm playing with it. And we start talking about stuff on that part. Nobody has turned me down. Nobody said no. But now when you do this, you better be prepared on the receiving end of what might come. Sometimes you may have a 10-minute conversation, and sometimes you may have a 2-hour conversation on the tailgate of a truck where somebody tells you about the stuff. And I've had some pretty good conversations out here, okay, on that part. You know, I had one farmer shake my hand late one night. He held my hand, said, "You've been involved in suicide?" And I said, "Yes, sir. I've seen it. I've helped clean it up where I've been a farmer. I've been a grain and dairy farmer my whole life. And then I got into fire rescue and EMS and been teaching fire and rescue and safety for 33 years. Okay. I'm not no new pup here. I'm the old dog in the game." And he says, "You've been personally involved in suicide?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I have." And then he opened up and told me that 35 years ago, his wife took her life in the kitchen in front of their son and made for a long night. I knew that man, didn't know that story. So I never know where the story goes to. And everybody out here kind of knows somebody that's been involved in suicide. Every one of us sitting here today, we know somebody that's took their life. And one of the big things about suicide is it ends their problems, but it dumps them on the rest of us living and multiplies them on us on that part. So it gives them a chance to share. I pull out my coin, just like I'm sitting here fiddling with it right now. I'm sitting here playing with it. But here's the biggest thing of all. I want y'all to read the back here. I'm trying to get the camera. Okay, I'll move up. It says, got the suicide hotline, but it says, "You are appreciated." And then underneath it says, "Life is good." And I'll talk to you. And I'm just going to get Dr. Mazur sitting there. I went to Dr. Mazur's house one day and sat down her and her husband. We talked about what I was doing and why I was doing it and wanting to do it. Pulled out my coin and asked her if she wanted to shake my hand, and Dr. Mazur shook my hand. If I pull out my coin and I offer it to you and you go to take it, it ain't just a gift, okay? It's a challenge I will give you personally from me. I'll give you my coin in a handshake. We shake hands. But if you take my coin, you will take my challenge. You will give me your word. You know, and I'm not telling you, it's farmers value handshakes and they value word, okay? You know, if I owe something to, if I do something, I shake your hand, tell you I'm going to do it. I don't need a contract and a lawyer, no offense, to tell me I got to do it. I'm going to do it because I believe it. Okay, this is farmers. You talking about many, many generations of farmers, and the deeds ain't changed because it was done with the value of a handshake from one generation to the next. And nowadays, our grandpas did them handshakes and there was no paper. But I put value in my handshake. You take my coin, you give me your word. You feel down out lonesome and blue, you call somebody, you call me, you call anybody. I don't care who you call. Worst comes to worst, there's a number on the back. I'll give you my personal cell number. Call me, I don't care. If I can answer, I'll answer. If your name's in there, I will answer. If it comes up as spam, then probably not. Y'all understand the spam calls. But here, you call somebody, you give me your word. And then if you take my coin in that handshake and give me your word, I give you my coin. And we shake hands. Sometimes we hug, do different things. This past weekend, I was in Owensboro, Kentucky. I shook some hands. Sometimes you don't realize how much it changes something till you go home a few days later and you read some of the posts that they wrote about. Somebody stopped and shook their hand, took time on that part. But here's one thing I can tell you. If me and you shake hands and you take my coin, every time you look at this coin, you'll never forget where you stood the day I shook your hand. You'll never forget how you felt when I patted you on the back and told you I appreciate it. Instead of somebody fussing and griping and complaining about everything, I stopped and told you I appreciate it. That is the value of a handshake and putting your heart into it. If you can't do it right, don't pick a coin up and do it on that part there. We don't lay coins on the table. We don't put them out in public. Coins in my pocket. Sometimes I'll carry 1 or 2 coins a day. So sometimes I can't shake hands all day long and deal with the mental game that comes with the value of a handshake. If you put your heart into it, sometimes it's a whole lot to deal with when it comes back. So that's the value of a handshake, and I'll answer any questions y'all have on that.
Dale, I think you made a great point of just making it intentional can make someone feel so appreciated. And sometimes that's all people want, because it makes them feel important, and it can change their perspective just in that one interaction. So we hope you never stop, and we hope that you continue to pass this on so others can do the same thing. Does anybody have any questions for Dale?
I can tell you all this. I've been to Western Kentucky twice now in the past 2 months. Down there, been sent down just to visit with some farmers. And it's one thing to be sitting there on a farm or a tailgate of a truck or leaning over a truck. And you look at everything a farmer has worked for 40 years above across the field. And you shake their hand, have a good day on that part.
So far, no questions, but they're really happy with what you're doing. Lots of thank yous. Joan's privileged
I'd
to
like
work
to
with
say,
you.
I think that just the value of the handshake, it really does mean so much, because a handshake is something that's been around for as long as we can remember.
Yeah.
You know, it's a recognition that you respect someone, that you're listening to them, that you're present with them. I think it means a lot more than other things, other gestures. And I think for men, I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, not as a man, but just that, you know, the handshake for men, I think means just a lot more than maybe a female, at least for me. You know, for me, it might be a hug or something, but, you know, for a man, it's recognizing, you know, you have strength, you can get through this, you know, it just volumes, and that small gesture. So I appreciate what you're doing, and wish there were more of you to to go around.
Well, you said hug. The handshake, I'm going to say 90% of the time, the handshake ends up in a hug. And I don't care whether it's a brother or sister there on that part. You know, I'm going to say probably 60% of the people I shook hands has been men, probably 40% female, because I don't pay attention to sex or nothing like that. If you're out here working with me, you fighting fire, you're farming, whatever on that right there, we working together. And I see a stress, or I see an issue, or I see a friend that I hadn't seen in a while, I'll shake your hug. And if you lean in and want a hug, I shake your hand. If you want a hug, I hug you. And we talk on that part right there and everything.
Thank you, Dale. If anybody's interested in kind of like how Dale has probably rolled this out, he's put a lot of work and effort into it. I'm sure he wouldn't mind being contacted. Is that okay, Dale?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
I do have one question in the chat that was somehow sent to me, and it's for Veronica. So I'd like to share that question. What professional resources are available that may be free to producers to get the process started to legally claim and own heirs property?
You know, that's very state specific. It really depends on what state you're in. I will say that here in Georgia, we have a few resources. I'm actually partnering with Georgia Department of Agriculture and several other partners, including AgriSafe, to be able to provide some. We're doing a lot of trainings on heirs property and estate planning and succession planning, but we're also going to be providing some at the least low cost legal services for farmers to help them to, if we can't do the full planning for them, to make sure that they can at least start the process, or even to do an assessment on the land. If there is an heirs property concern, we can help the farmer to understand what's going on with their process. It's very challenging to go too far in depth for free or low cost, because there's a lot that goes into it. And so sometimes there is some financial investment required. So of course, my firm, and then there's also some nonprofits here. There's Georgia Heirs Property Law Center. Last I heard, they have a sliding fee scale that might be free services for some, and it might be a little bit higher for others. There's also the Federation of Southern Cooperatives that is in Georgia, but it also spans across other states of the South. I know that in South Carolina, we have the Center for Heirs Property Preservation. And there are other projects around the country, especially in light of the attention that's being brought to heirs property. There's some funds that the USDA is making available with some relending programs where it's not money that you get to take and keep, but there's a low interest rate loan that's supposed to be offered for farmers to allow them to do some things to clear the title to their heirs property and pay those loans back on more favorable terms. That's still being kind of rolled out, and the details are still coming forth. But there are some things that are being made available on a grander scale as time goes on. But the resources that I stated before, they've been around for a little while, but there's increasingly more and more resources that I'm learning about every day, especially like I said, with the focused attention that we're seeing now on heirs property and farming. So I would just say right now, if any of the resources I named before don't apply to you because you're not in that state, then you might just want to try a Google search, because like I said, there's a lot of projects that are rolling out now that are helping farmers with heirs property. So just kind of see what's out there. I will say with this, in Georgia, we're working under the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network. And there's a southern one, but then there's other ones around the country that are offering some heirs property resources or services.
Okay. That's great information. Thank you, Veronica. And for those of you interested in, if you want to contact Dale, he has put his email in the chat, and Dale is a talker, and he's also offered up his cell phone number. So Dale, if someone texted you to that way you'd know who they are, do you respond to text? Then that way maybe the call won't look like spam. Great.
All right. Anybody else have any questions for our speakers today? We will go ahead and get this meeting uploaded to YouTube in the next couple of days. And just remember, it's an unlisted link. We want to keep it private because we haven't asked everybody, if it's okay to share publicly. So when you do get that link and you want to forward it to some colleagues, or your other staff, just remember that they have to have that specific link because it won't show up publicly on our AgriSafe page. And we do have some feelers out there for next month's meeting, but if you would like to volunteer to talk about your organization or what you're doing in the mental health field, please contact me at Carrie Portell. It's cportell@agrisafe.org. We would love to get you up here and let everybody know what you're doing. And then also I am going to put in the chat our AgriStress Facebook page. Every Friday, we're featuring some people who are helping us, and sometimes Facebook lets me tag the person in the organization, sometimes it does not. So Heidi, last week I meant to send you an email, but I was at a conference in Nebraska and forgot all about it, but you were our featured person last Friday, and it just would not let me tag anything regarding you. So if you guys want to go there, and then that is also the page that if you guys have any kind of promotions coming up that you want help getting out there sharing, just either post it to the page and I will approve it, or you can send it to me directly and we'll get it up there for you and share it with our audience. So if nobody has anything else, we can go ahead and end today. Okay, Heidi, I see you. We can end today, and then we'll get you that YouTube link and see you next month. All right. Thanks, everybody.